Welcome back to the Fantasy Fortune YouTube channel. Today we have four and a half players that are falling down my fantasy football rankings as we approach draft season. Today is August 13th, 2024. And before I get into the four, I'll say that honorable mention is Jahmyr Gibbs because news came out that he suffered a hamstring injury in practice, of course, a couple days after I drafted him in my biggest league, so that was nice. Couldn't even have a week in peace, but I'm just mentioning him because he could probably fall down the rankings a little bit, but we just haven't heard enough about it as I record this. But let's get into the first guy, and the first guy is Christian McCaffrey. I think that the first and the second guy on this list, everyone's going to hate, but I think I can make a pretty good case here. And the first thing I'll do is pop up a tweet from Joe Orco on Twitter. So it used to be the case that if Christian McCaffrey played 14 plus games, he'd be the best player in fantasy football by a wide margin. For this reason, he was the clear 101 without question. That's no longer the case. Breece Hall, Bijan, CD, Tyreek even are capable of scoring at a CMC type level every week. Running backs aged 24 to 27 typically score the most fantasy points per game. CMC is 28 years old, and if you're aware of the age graphic from Ryan Heath, age 28 is not a very good age to be for a fantasy football running back, no matter who you are. No running back has ever finished as a top 2 PPR running back 3 seasons in a row. McCaffrey's been top 2. If CMC were to finish a top 2 PPR running back this season, he'd be the first to ever do it, and quite honestly, that'd make him the GOAT PPR running back. Is it possible? Yeah, but is it likely? I don't know. Now consider his workload from last season as well. Only one of the last 11 running back touch leaders has finished top 12 at the position the following year. And there's a whole bunch of other guys with very good stats on basically the odds and the history of not only CMC's age, but his workload and his consistent finishes inside the top 2. There's no reason for him not to be like the first overall pick if you're just looking at what he did last year. But if you're looking at the history, it worries me. Like, I'm completely understand if you're taking Christian McCaffrey first overall, you probably have a pretty good argument. But me, that worries me. If I'm sitting at 101 and I haven't had to yet, I don't think I would be taking Christian McCaffrey, and I will be posting a how your first round should go in a couple of days. But another reason that, CMC should not be 101 right now, he's already dealing with a calf injury holding him out of practice and preseason and training camp and all that. Which is okay. We don't know enough about the calf injury yet, but we've seen people start the year with injuries. Cooper Kupp and his hamstring last season. It doesn't always go well, and I'll wait till we hear more. But even if we hear that it's not a big deal, those things can linger. So, I would say that history backs up that he will have a slower start because of his age, or maybe he'll get injured because he's led the league in touches. There's just so many different things that point to him maybe not being the 101. For me, he's not the 101. And I'll tell you in the next video how many guys I would take over him, but he's not one of my top few picks simply because I'm nervous. The next one is Puka Nacua. Now, this is another guy that's already dealing with an injury. He's dealing with a knee injury. And I'll pop up a tweet from Davis Maddock on Twitter talking about Puka Nacua's injury history. The reason that he fell, well, I'll read the tweet. Not sounding the alarm on Puka, but the reason he was a 5th-round pick was due to injuries and a bad 40 time, dating all the way back to high school. I can't find any coach statements, but he basically never got full routes in college with all those lower body injuries. He suffered a couple injuries last year. He didn't end up missing too much time. But let's read some of these. He's not going to surprise anyone next year, and the health concerns that he had coming out of college didn't magically disappear because of one season where he stayed relatively injury-free. That can change quickly. The next week, Puka scored his second touchdown of the season in a loss to Oregon, and in which he would face brother Samson's Utah Utes. He broke his foot and missed the remainder of his freshman year. Nacua saw limited action at the USC Elite Camp with a groin injury, but against top flight competition, blah, blah, blah. Led the Cougars in receiving yards in 2021 and 22. He battled injuries in 2022 to lead BYU with 48 catches, 625, and 5 touchdowns. Basically, all the way back to high school, he's had injury problems, and I'm not going to be that guy, right, that's going to sit here and predict injuries, right? I don't want to be like, I'm worried he's going to get nervous. Like, you should never draft like that, even though I'm talking about injuries with both of these two guys. First of all, the history for both of them, but mostly, for both of them, says that an injury is a lot more likely than others. But like I said, I don't want to predict injuries, so I wouldn't just straight up say, he might get hurt, right? But they both already have injuries, and that is what worries me. So, but I'm not even going to lie. Like, aside from the injury, that is what really made me knock him down. I wasn't in on Puka in the first place. In the first round, it's kind of a crazy ADP to me. So, first of all, a tweet from Ian Harditz. If you look at the splits between Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, where they both played full games last season with Stafford, Puka had one more target than Cooper Kupp, and we know that Cooper Kupp was not healthy last year. And even if he was for a few games towards the end of the season, it wasn't Cooper Kupp himself. Now we're going into this year, and all we're hearing out of training camp is how good and how healthy Cooper Kupp looks. He's back to his 2021 self. Now, their training camp reports, you can decide how reliable you think they are, but we're hearing it from everybody, and it makes sense. So, there's the guy that had the Triple Crown 2 years ago, and even in 2022, he got injured after like a portion, like I want to say first half of the year. He was wide receiver 1 in points per game, and then last year he saw some spike weeks, but he was just never healthy. And yes, he's 31 years old. Who knows? But it doesn't help that Puka's a first-round pick, and he's not guaranteed to be the number one receiver for his team. I mean, there's guys that aren't guaranteed to be the number one option. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are in the first round. Like, one of them won't be the top option on their team, but he might not even be the number one receiver because, you still have Kyron Williams in here getting 20-plus touches. More splits with Puka and Kupp. Kupp was wide receiver 4. Puka was wide receiver 4 in points per game without Kupp, but only wide receiver 15 in points per game with Kupp. And this is, I don't remember who this is from. I want to say it's from Chris O'Brien on Twitter. He will be in this video because I use some of his stuff in all my videos. Basically, there's just too many red flags. I don't know if he'll be the number one guy. I don't know if he'll stay healthy. Not only will he might not be the number one guy, there's just more to this offense. And I could just be stupid. Like, he can come out and have a year like he did last year, but he's just not a guy that I want to target in the first round. And speaking of fading Puka Nacua, his underdog over-under for receiving touchdowns right now is 6.5. Smashing that under. Not only is he starting off with an injury, if Cooper Kupp is healthy the entire year, he's going to be playing in a crowded offense. Last year, he had 5 or 6 games with that receiver room to himself, and he didn't get over 6.5 touchdowns. I think this line is extremely high. You never know with Matthew Stafford, him staying healthy, Cooper Kupp. I just think there's so much that can go wrong here. I'm taking the under here, and if you use code FORTUNE when you make your first deposit, you can get up to $250 deposit match, which is a great deal. Even if you don't want to put in that much, you can throw in $10. They'll give you another $10 to use. It's a great deal, and you'll also get access to week 1 discounts that they already have, where they're discounting. They change it every couple of days, but this discounts will be out through up until week 1, where CeeDee Lamb was one of them. It's projected like 90-something yards. That's down to low 70s now. They're giving you some discounts, and you will also get a Breece Hall 1-yard free square for week 1. Like I said, use code FORTUNE, and you'll get all these promos. But let's get into the third guy, and that is Jayden Reed. And it doesn't have much to do with his talent. It has much more to do with his price and the receiving room that he's in. I'm all in on the Packers offense. Jordan Love, top 5 MVP candidate, top 5 in passing touchdowns projections. And Jayden Reed was the guy in this room last year, but I think there's a ton that can go wrong and a ton that is not sustainable from Jayden Reed. And yes, this could come back to bite me, because guys in second years that had good rookie seasons tend to do well in their second year, but not always. And I think Jayden Reed is just too expensive. So first of all, he played 52% of the Packers' offensive snaps last season. 52. That is a low total. And even in the preseason game that they've already played, these are the snap counts. So this is from Ryan Heath on Twitter. I have belabored this point all summer, but Jayden Reed is going to have a hard time growing his snap share if he can't take over outside reps from Doubs or Watson. Doubs had 21, Watson had 19, Jayden Reed 16, Wick 6. There's just a ton that can go wrong here. So not only is he, in terms of snap share, he's on the field the third most. And now he does have the slot roll and the end arounds and touchdowns. But I would argue this. I posted something hyping up Christian Watson a little bit. I think if there's anyone that's going to break out in this room, it's going to be him, but that's for another video. Jayden Reed, anyway, in that video, somebody in the comments was like, well, blah, blah, blah. I think he's going to get injured. And honestly, he's very touchdown dependent, more so than Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs. And I said, I'll give you injuries, right? I can't predict injuries. He might get hurt again with the hammy. Who knows? Jayden Reed and Romeo Doubs are 100% just as touchdown dependent as Christian Watson, if not more. Doubs only gave you a good week when he scored. Jayden Reed scored 10 touchdowns, which him and Addison were up there among the top of the rookies in touchdowns. That's a lot of touchdowns, especially for a guy that played half of the snaps. Now, there is such thing as, using a guy in the red zone. He gets the end around touchdowns. Like, he's used in a completely different way, so I get it. But if he's not repeating 10 touchdowns, this price is bad. Look at the prices of these 4 Packers wide receivers, which, by the way, every single one of them is getting wide receiver 1 hype. Like, literally, I can't say a bad thing about any of these guys, because somebody's attacking me in the comments saying he will be the wide receiver 1. Jayden Reed is by far the most expensive one, the only one inside the top 35. And there's Doubs right now is leading the team in snaps and getting the most wide receiver 1 hype right now, and he's outside the top 50. I just think this is way too expensive for, he'll have the spike weeks. He'll score. He'll have some big weeks, but he's going to have some low lows as well. And then let's get into my last guy. And it doesn't really have as much to do with anything going on currently. It just kind of comes down to some more research and content that I've seen out there lately that have kind of swayed me from other fantasy content creators and experts that I have, respect for their opinion. And this one's Evan Engram. I've seen a lot of stuff saying Evan Ingram's a good value, and I can understand that for a guy that was tight end 2 last season and now goes as tight end 8. Here's what I'll say. For tight ends, McBride, Kelsey, Andrews, Laporta, Kittle, Pitts, Ferguson. I'd rather have all of them over Evan Engram, and Ferguson's the only one going. I didn't say Kincaid either, did I? Engram goes as tight end 8. I have him as tight end 9. And Kittle also goes a very, very similar range to him. Well, I easily prefer Kittle over him. But let's talk about Evan Engram splits with Christian Kirk in the game. And this is when he kind of went nuclear last season. So with Christian Kirk, or without Christian Kirk, 19 fantasy points per game and 10 targets a game. But with Christian Kirk, down to 7.5 targets a game and only 11.6 fantasy points per game. And I would argue, 11.6, that's not bad. But his finish as tight end 2 last year was spiked by the long stretch without Christian Kirk towards the end of the season. So that is one thing I don't like. And I saw this tweet again from another guy, Snoog's Dynasty Society. I agree that there is strong target competition in Jacksonville, you can make the case that Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones might not be much different than Gabriel Davis and Brian Thomas, but not only is Travis Etienne getting a lot more hype to be more involved in the receiving game, Gabriel Davis and Brian Thomas led in snaps last season as the wide receiver, so maybe we're underestimating them. I'm all in on Brian Thomas. That's for another video. I think he's going to be an absolute animal in this offense. It's not necessarily that it's a different offense, and it's like more crowded or anything, because I do think it's pretty much the same crowded-wise. But last season, Evan Engram had the second most receptions by a tight end of all time with 114. The record is 116 from Zach Ertz in 2018. Now, impressive, right? I don't necessarily think that's something like you got to hold it against him. Like, that's awesome. Good, great job. Not sustainable, especially in an offense where I think ETN will be more involved. Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis are going to get theirs. And Christian Kirk, I think, will be leading this room in targets. And like I said, when he's healthy, Engram's not the same guy. Not only with that, obviously we've seen 2 top 5 finishes in a row on the Jaguars. And you can see, I mean, he had 30 plus more catches last season. He doesn't score, so I don't necessarily think, I think we can expect some regression in receptions, and he's not going to score. I mean, all the end zone targets that went to Calvin Ridley, I think are going to be used between Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis, and Christian Kirk even had 8 touchdowns a couple of years ago. Brian Thomas is the red zone guy, scored 17 touchdowns last season for college football, number 1. I just think that he's due for regression, and guys like George Kittle have been top 5 for 6 years in a row. Jake Ferguson has a lot more upside with his red zone targets that I think could legitimately double this season and be the second option in a pass-heavy Dallas Cowboys offense that was top 5 in scoring last year. And then obviously the top 6 guys I don't think should be debatable with the ceilings and the safety that those guys have. I don't think Evan Engram's a bad pick, unless you take him in the top 6, 7, 8. I think tight end 9, he's fine. So it's not a drastic change. I bumped him down a couple of spots. I just think it's something to note that a lot of people are just like, oh, he was tight end 2, second in receptions, cool, that's a great value. But Christian Kirk being healthy has an impact. All of the receivers for this season, going into the season being healthy, something to keep your eyes upon. But anyway, that'll do it. Today is August 13th, and tomorrow coming out will be my risers. I have 5 or 6 risers in my rankings, and then I'll have a how your first round of fantasy drafts should go. And then I have best wide receiver picks in the first 12 rounds. Those will all be out this week, so stay tuned. Please leave a like or a subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I put a lot of work into these videos. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.